Welcome to American Legacies, where we explore incredible stories of the people who shaped the nation. From founders like Benjamin Franklin to creators like Walt Disney, barrier breakers like Rosa Parks to stars like Frank Sinatra. Whether they led revolutions, inspired generations, or changed the course of history, their stories are woven into the fabric of America. Join us as we uncover the triumphs, struggles, and legacies of the heroes of our country. Let's get started. Chuck Yeager was a pilot who earned fame for, among other things, being the first person to break the sound barrier in flight. A World War II flying ace turned test pilot, Yeager's feats and personality made him an icon of American aviation and military history. His legacy spans from daring combat missions to record-breaking supersonic flights, and he is widely regarded as one of the greatest pilots of all time. This episode explores Yeager's life story, from a modest upbringing in rural West Virginia to his legendary status and impact on history. Charles Elwood Yeager was born on February 13, 1923, in the tiny community of Myra, West Virginia, and grew up in the nearby town of Hamlin. His father was a gas driller, and young Yeager learned to work with machinery from an early age, developing a knack for mechanics. He could disassemble and reassemble engines with ease. As a teen, Charles, going by Chuck, showed little initial interest in airplanes. In fact, when a plane made an emergency landing near his house, he went to look but wasn't particularly impressed. In high school, at Hamlin High, he played basketball and football and earned his best grades in geometry and typing. Shortly after high school, in September 1941, Yeager enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps, which later became the U.S. Army Air Forces. He initially joined as an aircraft mechanic, not as a pilot, and was posted to Victorville, California. At first, he had no burning desire to fly. He chose the Army over the Navy mostly because the Army recruiter was more persuasive, and he simply wanted a steady job as a mechanic. However, the outbreak of World War II soon opened new opportunities. The Army Air Forces launched a program called Flying Sergeant to train enlisted men as pilots. Chuck signed up in 1942, lured by the prospect of a promotion and pay raise. He proved to be a natural pilot during training. Notably, he had extraordinarily sharp vision, which would serve him well in aerial combat. Yeager earned his pilot wings and was sent to Europe as a fighter pilot with the 8th Air Force. Flying the P-51 Mustang, he nicknamed his plane Glamorous Glenn after his girlfriend, Glennis. During World War II, Yeager quickly demonstrated bravery and skill. He scored his first aerial kill in early 1944 on his 7th combat mission. However, just a day after that first victory, Yeager's luck took a turn. On his very next mission, he was shot down over German-occupied France. Wounded and stranded behind enemy lines, the 21-year-old pilot evaded capture with the help of the French resistance. He made a harrowing trek into neutral Spain and eventually returned to England. For aiding another downed airman during that escape, carrying an injured fellow crewman over the mountains, Yeager earned a Bronze Star for valor. Back in England, Yeager confronted a military rule that evaders, downed airmen who escaped, could not be sent back into combat in order to protect resistance networks if they were shot down again. Determined to keep fighting, Yeager boldly appealed directly to Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower to waive the rule. His persistence paid off. Eisenhower personally approved Yeager's request, allowing him to rejoin his unit in time for the post-D-Day air campaign. Yeager soon proved Eisenhower's decision wise. In October 1944, he accomplished the rare feat of ace in a day, shooting down 5 German planes in a single mission. In an episode that has become legendary, 2 of those 5 enemy fighters were downed without Yeager firing a shot. He maneuvered into firing position on a pair of German Bf-109 fighters. One of them panicked and accidentally collided with his wingman in an attempt to escape Yeager's attack. He even scored a victory against a cutting-edge German jet fighter, shooting it down with his propeller-driven P-51 as the jet was on final approach to land. By war's end, Captain Yeager had flown 64 combat missions and was credited with 11.5 aerial victories, the .5 reflecting a shared kill. He was 22 years old and already a decorated flying ace, known for cool courage and uncanny marksmanship. With World War II over, Yeager's career took a new turn. In early 1945, he returned stateside and married his sweetheart Glennis. He worked as a maintenance officer at Wright Field in Ohio, test flying repaired aircraft of all types, an experience that broadened his aviation skills. His talent did not go unnoticed. The chief of the Air Force's flight test program, Colonel Albert Boyd, handpicked Yeager to become a test pilot in the cutting-edge world of experimental aircraft. That summer, Yeager was assigned to Muroc Army Airfield in California, now Edwards Air Force Base, the hub of high-speed flight research. He soon learned that he would be the pilot for an ambitious, top-secret mission: to fly the rocket-powered Bell X-1 and attempt to break the sound barrier, something no pilot had ever done. At the time, many scientists and aviators openly questioned whether a plane could fly faster than sound, about 767 miles per hour at altitude, and whether a human could survive it. Several attempts to approach Mach 1 had ended with aircraft destroyed by violent shock waves. Initially, a civilian Bell aircraft test pilot had been slated for the job, but when he demanded an exorbitant fee of $150,000 to risk the attempt, the military turned to Yeager. The young captain's combination of skill and fearlessness made him an ideal choice. In the days leading up to the historic flight, Yeager faced an unexpected hurdle. 2 nights before the mission, he broke 2 ribs in a horseback riding accident. Afraid that admitting the injury would sideline him, Yeager told only his wife and a local civilian doctor, who taped his ribs. On the morning of the flight, October 14, 1947, Yeager was in pain and couldn't even shut the X-1's hatch by himself. In a bit of creative problem-solving, he enlisted his friend and fellow test pilot, Jack Ridley, who fashioned a makeshift lever out of a sawed-off broom handle to help Yeager seal the cockpit hatch securely. Thus patched up, both man and machine were ready. Just past 10:30 a.m. that day, Yeager was dropped from a B-29 mothership in the orange, bullet-shaped Bell X-1 he had nicknamed Glamorous Glennis. Powered by its rocket engine, the X-1 streaked to 43,000 feet, and Yeager accelerated to Mach 1.05, which is about 778 miles per hour, achieving what no one before had: the first controlled supersonic flight. As he pierced the sound barrier, a tremendous sonic boom roared across the Mojave Desert's Rogers Dry Lake. Those on the ground weren't sure if the plane hadn't disintegrated, but Yeager's voice soon crackled over the radio with a characteristically laconic quip. He reported that everything was under control and joked, "I'm still wearing my ears," and nothing else fell off. 24-year-old Chuck Yeager had flown faster than any human being ever had up to that point. The mythic sound barrier was conquered. The success was initially kept classified. News of Yeager's supersonic flight was not made public for about 8 months. But within military and aviation circles, word spread quickly. Yeager instantly became a hero among test pilots. He received multiple honors for the feat, including the McKay Trophy and the Collier Trophy, presented by President Harry Truman. Years later, he would also be awarded a special Congressional Silver Medal for this achievement. The bright orange X-1, Glamorous Glennis, now hangs in the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. Yeager's sound barrier flight, accomplished with broken ribs and a bit of ingenuity, is perhaps his most famous accomplishment, but it was far from the end of his record-setting days. In the words of historian David Ongst, many people know Yeager for breaking the sound barrier, but that feat is only one of his many important achievements. Indeed, Yeager's test pilot career continued to blaze new trails in the years that followed. Yeager remained at Muroc as one of the Air Force's premier test pilots. He soon racked up more firsts. In 1953, now a 30-year-old major, Yeager was piloting the new Bell X-1A, an advanced version of the X-1, in a quest to set an even higher speed record. On December 12, 1953, he succeeded in spades. He pushed the X-1A to a speed of Mach 2.4, a new world speed record at the time. Ever the competitor, Yeager undertook this flight partly to beat a rival. Just weeks earlier, Navy test pilot Scott Crossfield had become the first to reach Mach 2 in a different experimental aircraft. Not to be outdone, he reclaimed the title of fastest man alive. However, the Mach 2.4 flight nearly ended in disaster. Immediately after achieving the record speed, Yeager's X-1A went out of control due to a phenomenon called inertia coupling. The aircraft began wildly tumbling and spinning at an altitude above 80,000 feet. Yeager was blacked out and thrown about the cockpit, even smashing his helmet into the canopy. He lost a staggering 51,000 feet of altitude in less than a minute before managing to recover from the spin, around 29,000 feet. Despite a split forehead and a shaken plane, Yeager regained control and safely landed, impressing everyone with his cool handling of the near catastrophe. For that feat of piloting skill and courage, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal in 1954. Yeager continued to test a variety of high-performance aircraft. He was one of the first Americans to fly a captured Russian MiG-15 jet fighter after a North Korean pilot defected and landed one in South Korea. He also assisted famed female aviator Jackie Cochran, coaching her on flying advanced jets so she could become the first woman to break the sound barrier, a goal she achieved in 1953 with Yeager flying as her chase pilot. Yeager's proficiency across many aircraft types became legendary. As he liked to say, in combat or testing, it's the man, not the machine. In the early 1960s, Yeager took on a new challenge, training the next generation of elite pilots. Despite having only a high school education himself, Yeager was selected as the first commandant of the U.S. Air Force's new Aerospace Research Pilot School, later named the USAF Test Pilot School. In this role, Colonel Yeager trained military test pilots, including many who would become NASA's Apollo and Space Shuttle astronauts. Parenthetically, Yeager himself was ineligible to become an astronaut because, unlike those he trained, he lacked a college degree. His time at the school generated one of his famous anecdotes involving a future astronaut. Neil Armstrong, who would later walk on the moon, was one of the students testing the boundaries of flight at Edwards in the mid-60s. On one occasion, Armstrong wanted to use a dry lake bed in Nevada as an emergency landing site for the X-15 rocket plane. Yeager, with his vast experience, warned that the lake bed was too wet and unsafe, but Armstrong insisted on trying. So Yeager rode along with him in a T-33 jet to survey it. Sure enough, Armstrong's plane became stuck in the mud when they attempted a landing, requiring a rescue aircraft to retrieve them. The episode ended with Yeager having to devise a clever way to get picked up by a slow-moving rescue plane. Later, Yeager dryly remarked about the astronaut's piloting skills. Neil was a pretty good engineer. He wasn't too good an airplane driver. This good-natured ribbing illustrated Yeager's confidence and wit. Even as he compared himself favorably to one of America's most famous pilots, it was done with a chuckle. It also highlighted the difference between the instinctive flying skills Yeager honed and the more academic, engineering approach of the space-age pilots. One of the most dramatic and lesser-known episodes of Yeager's test career came in December 1963. He was flying a modified Lockheed F-104 starfighter equipped with a rocket engine, essentially an NF-104A, in an attempt to set a new altitude record. He zoomed to over 100,000 feet, but then the aircraft went out of control in the thin atmosphere. The plane entered a flat spin, an unrecoverable situation. Yeager was forced to eject at about 8,500 feet, falling from the edge of space. During the ejection, the high-speed wind tore off his helmet faceplate, and the rocket seat's exhaust set his oxygen supply on fire, badly burning his face. He parachuted to the ground alive, but with severe burns that required extensive, painful skin grafts. Yeager's toughness through this ordeal only added to his legend. The image of him, suit-faced and injured, walking away from the crash, was immortalized in Tom Wolfe's book, The Right Stuff. Indeed, this harrowing accident effectively marked the end of Yeager's time chasing flight records, but it demonstrated the risks he was willing to take in the name of pushing the boundaries of aviation. Even as he carved out a place in history as a test pilot, Yeager remained at heart a fighter pilot and military officer. In the mid-1950s, he transitioned from the experimental flight world back into operational service. From 1954 to 1957, Colonel Yeager commanded the 417 Fighter Bomber Squadron in West Germany. He then returned to the U.S. to lead the first Fighter Day Squadron flying F-100 Super Sabres. And by the early 1960s, he was in charge of the prestigious Aerospace Research Pilot School, as mentioned. In 1966, with the United States deeply engaged in the Vietnam War, Yeager, now in his mid-40s, sought a combat command. He took over as commander of the 405th Fighter Wing at Clark Air Base in the Philippines. In this role, he periodically deployed to South Vietnam and flew 127 combat missions during 1966 to 67. It was relatively rare for someone of Yeager's rank and fame to fly combat at that stage, but he led by example. In 1968, Yeager assumed command of the 4th Tactical Fighter Wing in North Carolina, and soon after, he led that wing's F-4 Phantom fighters to South Korea during a confrontation with North Korea. His leadership and the performance of his units earned notice. In 1969, Yeager was promoted to Brigadier General. Yeager became one of the few individuals in Air Force history to rise from the lowest enlisted rank to general officer rank. Chuck's final active duty assignment was as a U.S. defense representative in Pakistan. In that post, he advised the Pakistani Air Force during a period that included the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. He helped train Pakistani pilots and even flew alongside them on certain operations. He once exuberantly recounted how he gave tips on fitting American Sidewinder missiles on Pakistani jets and claimed their pilots achieved a favorable kill ratio. He also indulged his adventurous spirit by flying a small aircraft to visit the Himalayas, on one occasion taking a Pakistani F-86 fighter jet on a joyride to see K2, the world's second highest mountain. His time in South Asia was not without incident. During the 1971 war, an Indian air raid destroyed his personal Beechcraft transport plane on the ground, an attack he took very personally. He was convinced it was a message from India to Uncle Sam. Nonetheless, he carried out his duties until 1973, after which he returned to the U.S. On March 1, 1975, he retired from the Air Force at the rank of Brigadier General. He capped a military career spanning over 3 decades. Fittingly, his final active flight as an Air Force officer had occurred just a few weeks earlier. Even in his last days of service, Yeager was flying jets. By the time of his retirement at age 52, Yeager had earned a stack of military decorations, including the Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross with Clusters, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Legion of Merit, and the Air Medal, among others. He would later also receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest U.S. civilian honor, for his contributions to aviation, awarded by President Ronald Reagan in 1985. Though retired from the Air Force, his fame grew. Author Tom Wolfe, in his best-selling book The Right Stuff, featured Yeager as a central character, the embodiment of the fearless test pilot ethos. Wolfe portrayed Yeager as the man with the right stuff, who, despite not becoming an astronaut, was revered by those who did. In 1983, The Right Stuff was made into a Hollywood film, with actor Sam Shepard portraying Yeager. Fittingly, Yeager himself made a cameo appearance in the movie. He appears as a bartender at Poncho's Place, the desert tavern frequented by test pilots. In one scene, Shepard walks in after a harrowing flight, and the real Yeager delivers him a drink, a sly cinematic tip of the hat. Yeager quipped that playing a bartender was appropriate because, if all the hours were ever totaled, I reckon I spent more time at Poncho Barnes's bar than in a cockpit during those Edwards years. Yeager's celebrity status led to many opportunities. He became a commercial spokesman, lending his rugged, no-nonsense image to endorsements. He twice served as the honorary pace car driver at the Indianapolis 500. President Reagan appointed him to the Rogers Commission, the panel that investigated the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion. He also lent his expertise to popular culture. He was a technical advisor for a series of flight simulator video games that bore his name. These game packages featured Yeager's own anecdotes and folksy advice, which young players greatly enjoyed. On the 50th anniversary of his supersonic triumph, 74-year-old Yeager once again broke the sound barrier, flying past Mach 1 in an F-15 Eagle. And 15 years later, at the age of 89, he rode as co-pilot in an F-15 to celebrate the 65th anniversary of his original Mach 1 flight. Few, if any, pilots have ever flown at supersonic speeds at such an advanced age. In December 2020, Chuck died at age 97. His passing was announced in a tweet by his daughter, who called it the end of an era. Tributes poured in from around the world. The U.S. Air Force lauded him as the greatest pilot of his generation, and countless obituaries retold his most thrilling exploits, from dogfights over wartime Europe to the momentous breaking of the sound barrier. He is often compared to earlier pioneers like the Wright brothers or Charles Lindbergh, and to later space-age heroes like Neil Armstrong and John Glenn. Like the Wrights, Yeager achieved something that expanded the realm of the possible. And like Lindbergh's solo Atlantic crossing in 1927, Yeager's Mach 1 flight captured imaginations and symbolized human daring in the post-war age. In the pantheon of 20th-century aviators, Yeager stands alongside these figures for having pushed the envelope of flight, going faster, higher, and further, and challenging the limits of aircraft technology. His career was integral to the development of American military aviation. Yet Yeager's story also contrasts in ways with many of those figures. Unlike Lindbergh or Glenn, Yeager came from a humble background and had no college education. He was a farm boy from West Virginia who started as an enlisted mechanic, in an era when most celebrated pilots were officers or had engineering degrees. Yeager remained proud of his roots and was known for his plain-spoken, self-confident demeanor. He often downplayed his own heroism, framing it in terms of duty. Speaking about dangerous missions, he said matter-of-factly, "It's your duty to fly the airplane. If you get killed in it, you don't know anything about it anyway. If it's your duty to do it, that's the way it is." This unpretentious attitude endeared him to the public and fellow service members. In terms of sheer flying skill, peers and historians consider Yeager one of the greatest stick-and-rudder pilots who ever lived. In 2003, Air and Space magazine ranked him 5th on its list of the top pilots of all time. Fellow pilots marveled at his eyesight, reflexes, and coolness under pressure. He had a mix of fearlessness and judgment that allowed him to succeed where others might panic. Astronauts who trained under Yeager respected him immensely. Even those who surpassed him in fame acknowledged the trail he blazed. For example, John Glenn once credited Yeager's supersonic test work as a critical foundation for the space program, and Neil Armstrong maintained great respect for him. His impact is literally set in stone. Airports, bridges, and programs bear his name, like Yeager Airport in Charleston, West Virginia, and a Charleston Bridge, under which he famously once flew a jet during a hometown visit. The Civil Air Patrol's Aerospace Education Award for cadets is called the General Chuck Yeager Award. He was enshrined in the National Aviation Hall of Fame, and he has been inducted into numerous other halls of fame and received honorary doctorates and honors. Chuck Yeager's life offers many important takeaways and lessons. Here are a few key points for history fans to remember. Yeager repeatedly put himself in harm's way to accomplish his missions, from lethal dogfights in World War II to daring test flights. He believed in doing his duty without complaint, saying that, if it's your job to face danger, that's the way it is. His bravery underpinned all his achievements. When faced with setbacks, Yeager didn't quit. After being shot down in World War II, he escaped and insisted on returning to combat. Injured before his supersonic flight, he found a way to fly with broken ribs. This tenacity in overcoming obstacles was central to his success. He combined natural talent with hard work to become a masterful pilot. Fellow aviators noted his uncanny instincts and calm problem-solving in crises, qualities that saved his life more than once. He set a standard for airmanship that pilots still admire today. He never adopted an elitist attitude. He remained a plain-speaking West Virginia boy at heart, often attributing his accomplishments to teamwork or just doing his job. He did not have a college degree or glamorous origins, which makes his rise all the more relatable, an example of how ability and experience can matter more than formal credentials in certain fields. He influenced the 20th century's most exciting chapters of flight. From a small-town youth, he became a war hero, a record-breaking test pilot, a revered general, and an enduring public figure. His story shows how courage, skill, and determination can not only make history, but also inspire those who follow. As the first man to shatter the limits of speed in the sky, Yeager's legacy will forever be the sound of freedom booming across the heavens, a fitting tribute to a life spent on the frontiers of the possible. Thanks for listening in on our journey into the fascinating life of Chuck Yeager. Join us next time as we consider another of our country's greatest treasures here on American Legacies. See you then.